Just back from IT Nation Secure 2025 and right outside of Orlando. It was a great event. Many vendors, many MSPs, just focused on security. The keynote kicked off and there was 4 people up on stage, a panel, and they were from different companies, not just ConnectWise. ConnectWise is trying to make this community, not just what they offer, but with others as well. But the vendor hall was full. There was lots of great vendors. I was able to have 16 conversations with great guests right there at the resort. I had great guests, great guests. First started with Gene Templin, MSP Sales Reimagined. Gene's in the Pitch It program, the ConnectWise, it's not new, but new for this year, incubator program. Jamie Williams, my friend from a long time ago, marketing before sales. MSPs, are you listening? Oh, Ricardo from Lumu. Yes, my fellow aviator. I've known Ricardo for a couple of years now, and great conversation. Ricardo. Oh, Rayanne, of course, Rayanne from ABC. The name of the episode is From Cables to Closing. Fascinating backstory to Rayanne and what she does now, also in the Pitch It program. Mike Estep from Blackpoint Cyber. Great story from MSP to vendor now. Blackpoint's a great security company, and it was a great conversation with Mike. Mark Balanov, first time I met Mark, really great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Talking about cyber lessons. David Chernitsky, fascinating background from Russia to Israel to Canada to what he knows about the martial arts and everything he learned from the best people in cybersecurity there in Israel. Great conversation. David, Matt Holland, first time I met Matt, great conversation from Spy Tech to MSP Simplicity. Tanner Cookson, fascinating from great company. MSPs getting paid quickly. We talked about rowing, riding, and revenue. Tim Weber, cybersecurity firm now. He's a volunteer firefighter in Connecticut, my home state. Joel Cahill, great conversation with Joel. I've known Joel for quite a while now. First time we ever sat and talked like this. The episode's Cold Plunges, Hot Takes, and Cyber Strategy. But great conversation with Joel. Paul Lupo from Bitdefender. Paul's been around for quite a while, and he has great stories and great insight on the great company that Bitdefender is. David Rasapor from ConnectWise, new CPO. Wonderful insights from David, his background in Iran, and David is just a true engineer. Ozzie Saeed from Compliance. He actually helped write the specs to CMMC. Fascinating conversation with Ozzie and the saltwater fish tanks as well. One of his great hobbies. Servash Rao, of course, I've known Servash for a couple of months now. Really focusing on MSPs, helping those SMBs with his with the security platform. And of course, ended with Matthew Benazari. Great conversation about, started with climbing. He's a great climber, about cyber fires and MSP fortitude there at Arete, and great conversation. Thanks all for being part of this, and thanks everyone for listening and watching.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. Found myself at 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. I took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People ask me, how'd you do it? What's the secret? I need to lose weight. How'd you do it? How did I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others.
What is it about saltwater aquariums that you like?
Oh, yeah. I ended up getting bit by a hobby bug, pretty much. That's where it started, right? So took my kid to go get a pet. My wife was like, no dogs, no cats. So we're like, oh, let's get a little fish, right? Started with the beta fish. Everybody starts with that.
Sure.
Next thing you know, we're looking at the aquarium, and we're like, wow, those look beautiful. What is it going to take to do those? And then one thing after the next, it just kept going.
Wow. And so what is obviously the water is salt versus fresh water, but as far as maintenance, is there a lot more?
I would actually say salt water is less maintenance than fresh water.
Interesting.
Yeah. Salt water, usually those systems have a ton of supporting systems with it, right? So there's concepts of protein removal, right? So there's a specific tool for that, or a product for that, right? A protein skimmer is what they call it.
Right.
So it's kind of self-sustaining a little bit more than a freshwater would be.
Interesting. But you're adding the salt to the water.
No, actually, so what we do is we buy typically pre-mixed water from these aquarium stores, or you can mix it yourself too, right? It has to be reverse osmosis water.
Interesting.
And then you mix salt into it. But yeah.
Wow. and the fish, what do you feed the fish?
So typically you'll use like frozen foods, which is mostly livestock based.
Wow.
So little plankton and things like that, and mysis shrimp and stuff like that.
Huh.
What they would eat in the wild.
They just as they would eat in the wild. Yeah. And these tanks, I've seen them, they can get pretty big, Ozzie.
Yeah. They're expensive as well.
Yes.
I think I went like 30 grand in at one point with a bunch of tanks.
Goodness.
Yeah.
And how often do you have to feed them?
Daily.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a daily routine.
And you still have them now?
Still do. Absolutely. Yep.
So, I mean, they're not as much work as a dog or a cat, but it's up there.
It's up there. It is. It's just a different thing, right?
Very cool. So we're here at the ConnectWise IT Nation Secure event outside of Orlando. What are some of your goals here this week, Ozzie?
Mostly focused on learning more from the MSP community. We're a SaaS-based GRC product, hyper-focused on scaling MSPs in terms of them offering cyber compliance services to their customers. My background is also in the CMMC space. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Of course.
I was involved in its creation.
Really?
So I helped. I helped author aspects of the scoping guide and the assessment guides for CMMC.
Wow.
Mostly focused on representing small businesses, right, and ensuring that the DoD can support small defense industrial-based suppliers, right. And in that journey and building my product out, that's kind of where I kept coming across these small manufacturers, and they were saying, "Talk to my MSP on what to do." And every so often, I would chat with an MSP, and I'm like, hey, you guys got to change the way you're handling things, because every time you respond to a support ticket, you create a new gap or finding in their compliance. And then it just started pivoting from there, where they're asking us questions like, well, teach us what we need to be doing. So then I completely pivoted my entire product roadmap, and even what we're doing is to help essentially MSPs. How do we help you go to market to do high caliber GRC as a service?
GRC as a service. Tell me more about helping document. How about creating the document? So you're working with the government? This is a federal thing, this requirement.
Yes, it's a defense industrial-based requirement for the entire Defense Department.
Wow.
And it goes all the way down to flow down, where essentially you have these prime contractors out there, right? Like Lockheed, Boeing, and so on and so forth. And the whole point of it is to protect what they call controlled unclassified information. This is not classified data, but it could be prone to intellectual property theft, right? And so, I think the story goes back to the Bush Jr. administration, where, a new fighter jet was being demoed to 4-star generals. A few months later, China has one that looks just like it.
Whoa.
And so we're asking ourselves, how do they get their hands on that, right? And it's through that supply chain, these small mom and pop shops that manufacture little nuts and bolts that end up going into these outcomes, right? Into these systems and programs. So that's the whole point of it, right? That's the mission.
And how many people are involved in creating this document, this spec?
So CMMC is a framework, just like HIPAA, just like SOC 2, just like ISO, right? It started its inception in the NIST world, right? So NIST 800-171, and the whole rule started off with self-attestations. Hey, you're a supplier in the defense industrial base. Tell us you're doing these things. Just say yay or nay, right? And sign here. And they realized that didn't help.
Right.
So they needed to adapt the program to include third-party validation through assessments, right? And so then it becomes this recurring assessment. Every 3 years, you get reassessed for your certification status.
Do you really?
That allows you to do business within the defense industrial base. And it's expanding right now. The Federal Acquisitions Regulations, the FAR, has released their FAR CUI rule. So I expect in the next 2 years, all U.S. federal agencies will require this. Canada's already started rolling their version of it out, which is also NIST 800-171 based. So I just think more and more of this stuff's going to happen, and I think MSPs are well positioned to help the small businesses out there.
And how did you get involved with creating the spec?
Sure. So my background was mostly in the DoD. So I did a lot of work in the Army and the Army Reserve, specifically with the information security focus, right? So they have a process called NIST RMF. This is to accredit information systems in the government for use. And so having experience using other GRC tools in the federal space, there's a lot of pain. Right? And I was like, there's got to be a better way. So when I caught wind in 2015 that this thing was coming out, this NIST 800-171, which led to CMMC, I said, small businesses are not going to be able to do this. This is very complex, right? There's a ton of nuances. And so I just became hyper-focused on figuring out how to help the smalls. And then as I was trying to help the smalls, realizing that they have no business being in a GRC tool, right? They've already got too many hats they're wearing.
Right.
So then oftentimes them pointing to their MSP, and I said, hey, those guys are well positioned to help their customers not just meet compliance obligations, but continue to do business in their space. So it's a win-win.
So before you got introduced to the MSPs through small businesses or smalls, you said, have you known them at all?
So MSPs prior to that, for me, the exposure that I have had some exposure indirectly, but the exposure that I had to that seemed to be hyper-focused on mostly information system availability and support, right? And then when I started dabbling into the MSP space and realizing, hey, these guys are great at SOC 2, they're great at HIPAA, they might be great at ISO 27001, but those are the easy stuff. They're struggling when it comes to more stringent requirements like CMMC.
I mean, compliance was a buzzword years ago, but now it's essential. MSPs were kind of pushing it off, but now they have to do it.
Absolutely, yep. And they still, every so often, even in the CMMC world, it's an emerging market. So in the CMMC world, you'll still hear MSPs saying, yeah, I only got 5% of my customer base that are in the DIB or the defense industrial base, right? Or they'll say, hey, we don't really want to support them anymore. And they look at it as an investment that's not going to yield good ROI, but what they fail to realize is the opportunity is massive, right? And I say this because when the DoD came out with a study saying how many contractors need to have this, they came out with a number that said 300,000 primes and subs, but what they failed to identify, because it's a very difficult thing to identify, is the way the law is written, it has this concept of a flow-down clause. So if in performance of that contract, they need to order parts or materials or professional labor from someone beneath them to make the whole contract, satisfied, then that supply chain is going to inherently receive that same information.
Interesting.
And so the primes are sending over a questionnaire, 4 questions saying, do you attest to having this? And as soon as that small business signs off on that, they're liable.
Wow.
So if a breach were to happen and it points at them, they're liable, right? So now I would speculate the number is roughly 300,000 times 6 or 8.
Whoa.
Because one example is Lockheed with one of their programs. It was an armored vehicle program. They have 10,000 U.S.-based suppliers in which they said 6,000 of them make custom build-to-spec materials and parts.
Wow.
That inherently means that data is flowing to those vendors.
And what's the pushback with MSPs? Because they themselves have to get certified.
Well, that's the misnomer, right?
Oh.
That's actually a misconception in CMMC, is people think that the MSPs need to get certified.
Right.
It's more of a marketing benefit, right, and a differentiator to get certified.
I see.
The angle that we always push is there's concept and scoping of CMMC where you're handling that government CUI data. And then another aspect is called security protection data, which is like your antivirus logs, your SIM logs, your phone scan results, right? Things like that. Security protection data does not require the same level of protections as CUI data. So an MSP naturally becomes the security protection asset, right? And if they can just limit their backups, right, and not back up CUI or not touch CUI, and you can have administrative mechanisms say, hey, every time I remote into your computer with that RMM tool, make sure you close out your CUI.
I see.
And that's allowed. We've actually taken 8 MSPs through the certification process with this exact strategy. And so we're trying to tell folks it's not as difficult as it seems. I think the biggest uphill battle is education, right? And a flavor of intellectual laziness.
What surprised you about the MSP industry, getting to know it a little bit more and more now?
Yeah, so I think the most impressive thing I came across as we just started dabbling in the MSP, we joined the ConnectWise Evolve peer groups, right, as a vendor. We've been attending these events, is how awesome the community is in terms of helping each other. I have never seen that. I mean, coming from a GovCon space, it's very cutthroat.
Yeah, it's
right?
very cutthroat.
They're absolutely out there trying to cut each other's throats, whereas here, they're sharing how they grew their business.
Right.
They're helping each other out. Just the focus on information sharing is just phenomenal. And I think that shocked us, and we fell in love.
And so now, are you exclusively working with MSPs?
Yes, that is our primary ideal customer for what we are doing. And so one of the things that we also realized is not just the product solution needs to help them scale, but also professional services, kind of like a franchise model, right? Where, hey, I have the recipe, I have the templates, I have the process, the methodologies, and it's all bottled into this platform. I'm also going to teach your sales guys how to sell it.
Wow.
I'm going to teach them how to price it and go to market and do battle cards and sales enablement, marketing enablement, right? That is also helping us fight against this uphill battle, right? Is if you make money, we will make money. So we're going to invest in you first. You're going to bring us more licenses.
Smart.
It's a win-win.
And how do MSPs make money with compliance?
Sure. So essentially, what's ironic is in CMMC, there's a huge emphasis on this concept called continuous monitoring. If you look at those controls in CMMC, there's about 40% of the total amount of controls are all technical and continuous monitoring focused. That is already where the MSPs are playing today.
Wow.
And they don't even realize it. Every time you patch a system, that's satisfying your requirement. Every time you're doing vuln management, EDR check-ins, right? Account management, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the idea is CMMC requires a paper trail, an auditable paper trail of operational evidence. Show me last month you checked the SIM logs. Show me this week you patched the systems. So MSPs are well positioned to do that.
Wow.
And so we're focused on showing them how they can do that through our platform, right? Integrating with their existing tool stack and say, we'll generate the paper trail as evidence for your customers. It's a win-win.
Yeah, it certainly is. And is this your first event?
This is not our first. We were at IT Nation Connect.
Oh,
last
in
year.
November. Oh.
In November.
That was a big event. It was
But this
great.
is our first Secure, and
I
we will
see.
be in November as well.
You'll be back at the
the next one. Yep.
Yeah, and working with ConnectWise. How's that been? Are you working with them at all directly?
we are. So we're actually, they're phenomenal,
Yeah.
right? We've been talking and working with specifically Patrick Beggs, who's the CISO at ConnectWise.
Patrick.
His team was evaluating CMMC, right? And how the ConnectWise product and services will be affected. And so we essentially said, hey, we would like to help you with that because we have a lot of our customers that use your products, right? So part of the CMMC requirement is with these security tools, like Imagine RMM products and Asaio, right, and things like that, you have to have what's called a CRM. It's a customer responsibility matrix. It's where you go through these CMMC controls and you say, hey, customer, this is what I'm already doing for you on the back end, which is I'm hosting it in a data center with physical security protections already in place. So if you're using our platform from the aspect of what data you're putting there, it's physically protected. You, however, are responsible to configure single sign-on, to match it with your password complexity requirements, integrate it with your MFA product, to meet those obligations. So we were working with Patrick's team to essentially build out, and we're still in the process of finalizing it, a CRM for the CMMC community.
That's pretty cool.
And then also an integration with the Asaio platform as well.
It pronounced Azio.
Azio, yeah.
Yes,
I
yes.
always do that. It's very tough.
Yes.
Azio, Asaio.
When MSPs are looking to partner with a vendor that does compliance, what questions should they be asking?
So one of the recommended questions would be, how can I help my clients most efficiently find a path towards compliance, right? The methodologies that we put together, although influenced heavily by NIST and CMMC, are exactly adoptable for HIPAA, SOC 2, ISO, you name it, right? And it always starts off with scoping. So the first question I always say is, you should ask, what is my scope of involvement? And how does my company get affected versus my clients who need these regulatory requirements, right? So scoping comes down to simply identifying what are we trying to protect, and 9 times out of 10, a framework is focused on a data point, right? Once you identify what that data looks like, you essentially go through and understand the business, your customer's business and your business, right? And see the alignment there. Ultimately, you're going to find out very quickly where it's stored, processed, and transmitted, which teams are involved, right? How does the product get produced? How do the services get delivered, et cetera, et cetera. With that, you can depict a what we call a system boundary diagram, right? It's a high-level bird's eye view Ultimately, it's a CMMC requirement as well, where your assessors or your clients can look at this diagram and see this bird's eye view, not as detailed as the network diagram, and say, within 60 seconds, I know exactly what my scope is. These things are not in scope, these things are, right? And so we always tell folks, focus on scoping and understanding, what's your involvement, what data you're handling on behalf of your clients, and what data they're handling. And I think if you combine scoping with the CRM, MSP's legal teams are going to love that, right? Why? Because you can have a delineation on where your liability starts and ends, and imagine the clean updates you can make to that MSA contract to your client base. We won't touch your CUI. We won't exfiltrate it, but we will provide these security functions. Boom, all right? That's a way you manage your liabilities, and I think that's a huge market opportunity that's not being addressed, and it's overlooked. Again, intellectual laziness. They see this wall of massive requirements and they get scared. They don't realize how attainable it actually is.
Yeah, passion for this. You love this, Scott.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. I know I do.
I'm a nerd for regulations.
yeah. Has there been anything in the last month or so, Ozzie, that you changed your mind on?
Well, I think the one thing that I realized, and it has changed my mind in the last month, specifically in the MSP community, is a lot of them don't necessarily care as much about the education as I thought they would. But I understand, I empathize, right? And I say I empathize because they have so much going on, MSPs typically, so many clients to manage, all with distinct context, right? And the context switching alone is just a huge challenge for productivity, right? That they don't really have the time to be experts per se.
Interesting.
So that's why we also have started adding more to our offerings to essentially say we want to be your partner, so that if you're in a crunch, you can just call us to join that client conversation.
Wow.
Right? And I realize that has been helpful, right? And again, they just need to simply be able to do their job, help their clients, make some money in the middle, right, off of this, and then that will help them scale, right? They don't have the time to invest in like a boot camp style, retraining staff, dedicating staff even, right? And so we've heavily focused on repositioning ourselves, including our product roadmap, to try to alleviate some of that burden, essentially, if that makes sense.
Very cool. So I started my MSP back in the 90s, Ozzie. I was working way too hard, 14, 16-hour days. You're no stranger to that.
Yep.
And next thing I know, I'm at the doctor office, and she tells me I'm at 340 pounds. She says, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. Scared the life out of me. Spent the next 6-7 months, lost about 120 pounds. Yeah. People ask me, what's your secret? I say, there's no secret. Discipline. That's how I lost it. Focus, willpower. How does discipline play a role in your life, Ozzie?
Oh, absolutely. Very similar to your story, right?
Oh, really?
I have two younger ones.
Yeah.
Mine was blood pressure, right? So went in there, startup founder. Yep. And they were like, hey, if you want to see your kids grow up, you got to do something about this, right? So I agree, it's discipline, and I think there is no shortcuts to even success in business, right? That's why one of the things I hyper-focused on for our team is we also did professional services to get customers like MSPs through the certification process, because we were adamant about feeling the pain firsthand. This way, our product roadmap that's intended to solve the pain is more informed. When I look at my competitors, they're not doing anything like that, right? They're typically just product only, figure it out yourself. And even their founding teams typically don't even have cybersecurity certifications, which is ironic to me. But regardless, I think if you can feel the burden and the pain yourself, and you can obsess over efficiencies and how to solve problems, right? And just be relentless with that, you're going to go places, period, right? So discipline's big in that.
As far as your nerdsomeness for, I don't think it's a word, but for regulation, how far does that extend? Does that extend to other regulations outside of compliance?
No, I usually try to keep it honed in on anything that's IT security, right, or InfoSec focused, because I'm not going to go into quality control and stuff like that, right? And again, hyper-focused on the MSPs as well, and that was because I felt that for me to reach the smalls, I needed to go through them. Right, because they already had the customers, right?
I like how you call small to medium business.
Exactly. Yeah. We call them SMB in the DoD space.
Yeah. What motivates you, Ozzie?
Legacy. I know that at the end of the day, we won't die with our income. We won't die with our materials, right? The only thing that lives on is your memories. So for me, it's big on making meaningful interactions with every person I meet, leave a good impression, show empathy, right? Live with their heart on the sleeve, right? Don't worry about getting burned because it's naturally going to happen.
Right.
And just be honest and a good person, right? Be helpful to people, and they will always remember you. Oftentimes, if I've ever gone out of my way to help people, like in the past, I started this side gig where I would help people get into the IT field. And I actually helped a homeless man get into the IT field.
Wow.
This was back in 2015, and it was always my side passion project, right? And they would always ask me, what do you want in return? I said, nothing much, right? You know, pay it forward for sure, right? Everyone says that. But if you're in town and it's convenient for you and you hear about it, please show up to my funeral and say a couple nice words. Because I have kids. I want them to remember that.
So given them your motivation of legacy and impact, how do you measure success, Ozzie?
So for me, it's making meaningful changes to our customers, right? And if I can help a customer grow a practice within their practice, right? This GRC is a service concept. If I can help them help their customers continue to do business in the defense industrial base, then to me it's a win-win, right? I want to be behind all of that. That's why I got involved in even helping with the creation of these CMMC, right? I was hyper-focused on just making sure it's accessible. My big analogy is that security shouldn't be a luxury. It should become commoditized, right? Should be democratized. You don't pay a premium for a seatbelt when you buy a car.
Yeah, right.
It's included. Safety should be included.
So your message to MSPs this week here in Orlando at IT Nation Secure is what?
My message would be, do not fear compliance. Welcome it, embrace it, and there's money to be had, right? That's my biggest message is you can do it. You're already doing it. And I think that's where, again, the intellectual laziness comes in. In an emerging market like CMMC, there's already tons of snake oil, right? So avoid that, right? And just become a realist, right? And focus on, you know, what is the minimum you could do, right? And like I said, everyone's already doing a decent amount of the requirements already, and they don't even know it.
So great. Thanks for your time today, Ozzie. Anybody
Absolutely.
who wants to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
LinkedIn, you can go on our website, IntelliGRC.com as well. But LinkedIn is probably going to be the best way to reach out to us.
IntelliGRC, so it's INTELLIGRC.
Correct.
And then your name, Ozzie Saeed, SAEED.
Correct.
On
Ozzie,
LinkedIn.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joey.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.